Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me today we have Louis Edwards
Hello.
and Aaron Harper.
Hello.
So we're 12 races into a 24 race season. That means it's time for us to assign our official mid-season driver grades. We're using the A star to F system, so A being really good, C being average but still a pass, and F being a complete and total failure. I wonder if we'll see any of those. Oh wait, let's get started. Aaron, Grid Talk has given Franco Colapinto an F. Is this justified?
I don't think so. I gave him a D because let's put it into context. He's been thrust in after what, 6 races into a team that's battling to understand its car, that is constantly changing the guy in charge. Flavio Briatore is now running the show. No one really seems to know what direction that team is going in. They've scrapped their power unit program. They're switching to Mercedes. They're looking at maybe bringing in Valtteri Bottas this season or maybe even for next season. So I think Franco has had a really rough deal. That said, his performances haven't been the level that we saw in his first few races for Williams. It's been more of the second half of that stint last year where he was a bit crashy and the pace wasn't there. But then again, he was going to a load of circuits that he didn't know. So I just think it's symptomatic of what's going on at Alpine because they don't really know which way is up and they're fighting to stay afloat. They're bottom of the constructors table with a car that on its day can be quite good. Gasly proved that at Silverstone. But again, Colapinto crashed in qualifying and then he didn't even do a lap. I think he came in for slicks at the end of the formation lap and just didn't return. I was kind of wondering if they sacked him there, but I don't know. I just don't know what happened to him. He was, he never reappeared on track. But I think F is a bit harsh. I think an E or a D would be a slightly more fair reflection of the circumstances and the effort he's put in. And that's not to say that he could do better because he can, because the results haven't been up to scratch, but I think F is probably a bit rough.
Yeah, we've certainly seen from him particularly during that time at Williams, that this kid does have speed, and it's just a case of, I think, just maturing a bit, getting that sure footing under him, because as you say, he's joined a team that no one knows whether they're coming or going on a week to week basis, and in Silverstone, there's talk of whether it was a continuation of the damage that was caused by his crash in qualifying, or if it was just them going, this isn't, let's just save him the embarrassment of crashing out on lap two and just have him retire on the formation lap instead. But let's have a look at his teammate. Well, not his teammate, the guy that he replaced, Louis. We've given Jack Doohan an E, which, for someone who's not managed to actually make it to this halfway point of the season, Aaron said that the F for Colapinto was harsh. Is an E for Jack Doohan generous?
Um, yeah, I guess so. It's a tricky one. Like I've said in past sort of driver grades, like if you don't make it to the end of the season, it's like an automatic F because you've you've literally lost your seat. But Jack Doohan came into this season on the back foot because we already knew that he'd be gone. It was a very strange circumstance that he found himself in. And his results, got them here in the 6 races that he did are not exactly show stopping. He DNF'd in Australia, 13th in China, 15th in Japan, 14th in Bahrain, 17th in Saudi, and then another DNF in his final race in Miami. It's not indicative of anyone that you'd be like, oh. But I think given what Colapinto has done, and it be almost the same in terms of like if we're basing purely off results, I think it may be a little bit kind, given that Doohan came in, lost his seat, and he's people. I think people just think of the injustice that they feel like he has been misserved. The fact he was only given 6 races, and he's been promptly just dropped, and the drivers come in, he's not done any better, so everyone's going, Jack Doohan wasn't that bad, well, was he? Kind of attitude. Having watched Jack in Formula 2, when things were working well for him and he was confident in the car, he was at some points head and shoulders clear of everybody else. He was rapid over a single lap. He could put a race together as well. So I think Alpine, in not giving him that opportunity, like a longer opportunity,
it was kind of a magpie syndrome, wasn't it? It was, oh, they saw this shiny thing in Franco Colapinto and thought the grass was greener. But actually, it's turned out that maybe they're the problem because the environment that they're providing for these young drivers isn't facilitating their growth. And they should have given Jack more time. 6, 7 races, it's just not enough. I mean, look, Red Bull have shown us that in the past. That they haven't historically given drivers enough time to flourish or the environment to do so. And Alpine have fallen into that trap as well. So I think Jack was really hard done by. His results by no means were great, but also you look at the environment in which he was having to perform. So, yeah, I mean, even Gasly, who's a seasoned pro in the midfield, has struggled. So that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, and it's quite apt as well that you should mention the Red Bull scenario there, Aaron, because, of course, they're very well known for chopping and changing drivers, not necessarily always working out. More often than not, you would argue it hasn't worked out. But let's look at a driver who was, you could say, unceremoniously dropped. Liam Lawson, we've given him a D. He's had 2 points finishes, both of which have come after being dropped from Red Bull into the Racing Bulls. But he is sat on 12 points in P16. How do you rate Liam Lawson's season so far?
Really poor. I gave him an E because I thought, first of all, that the droppage from Red Bull was ridiculous because they put in a youngster who'd basically done 11 races. You might as well have thrown in a rookie straight out of F2 because Lawson done two sort of mini substints over 2023 and 2024. That's nowhere near enough time to prepare him for going up against Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. And then they dropped him after 2 races where it was clear that the car was nigh on undrivable. Even Verstappen was struggling to get a tune out of it. And then they've thrown Sonoda in, and we'll talk about Sonoda, but Sonoda's not really done a huge amount better. So it's so infuriating and it's destroyed his confidence because if he'd stayed at Racing Bulls for the start of the season, I think he'd have a lot more points than he does now. He'd probably be much closer to Hadjar. I think he's just starting to get sort of up to speed in that regard, but Hadjar is sort of the new sparkly thing at Red Bull. Again, the Magpie, the shiny thing. Ooh, what he's doing really well. Let's go and put him in the Red Bull and just burn him. But yeah, I feel really sorry for Liam Lawson, but I would have expected more from him on his return to Racing Bulls, and that hasn't quite happened. But I also think that's a symptom of the soul crushing sort of hangover from being in the Red Bull alongside Verstappen and having your confidence absolutely shattered. And yeah, I feel so sorry for the guy, but he's got the second half of the season to show that he is still worthy of an F1 seat. However, I think he will be gone at the end of the year because I think Hadjar has shown he's got the speed, and I think Arvid Lindblad has the speed as well. And I think they're both slightly quicker than Liam Lawson, but I remain to be proven wrong.
Yeah, it's certainly definitely something to be said for the soul-shattering, confidence-crushing being dropped from Red Bull because we saw it with Danny Kvyat when he was dropped. He looked like a completely broken man at some points. Pierre Gasly got dropped and it took him a while to recover. I think ironically he might have been one of the highest performing Red Bull cars in the race after he was dropped, but obviously, one race versus an entire half a season. But I've also seen something about the fact that Liam Lawson, obviously, he did some driving for Racing Bulls as V-Carb last season, but the team that he was working with within that team is who Hadjar has around him now, whereas he's working with, it would have been who was in the RB?
Sonoda.
There we go. But he's working with Sonoda's team, so it's like, it's like looking at all of your old classmates when you've changed class and stuff and being like, hang on, you used to support me. And then, it's all kind of gone a bit Red Bull, as I guess that's probably a phrase now that I've just coined, but it's gone a bit Red Bull. And speaking of drivers who've had this season that's kind of been a bit Red Bull, Fernando Alonso, but we're giving him a C grade at Grid Talk, Louis. How have you rated, Fernando's season? Is this part of L Plan? Is it all going to L Plan? What do you think?
No, it's not. It's not at all. I mean, I gave Fernando a C, so for me, this grade is like what we've given him as a whole is very reflective of how I feel Fernando's season has gone. It's been okay, and that is It's nothing too dazzling, but I don't think it has been as bad as people were certainly making it out early in the season of just like, oh, he's finished, he's done. Like Lance Stroll is now the greatest thing that Aston Martin's ever like people were really, really blowing it out of proportion. I mean, I'm not just saying this as a big Fernando Alonso fan, but people really do just need to calm down. I know that as it stands, Lance Stroll is still higher in the driver's standing than Fernando, but that is mostly just down to his fourth like points finishes that he's managed to get. I think he got some in the Miami sprint as well, didn't he? So like, and let's face it, Fernando. The only time Stroll has beaten Fernando this season is when he scored points in the race. Otherwise, Fernando has beaten him every other time. I think he's completely crushing him in the qualifying battle as well. Like he's just doing what he needs to do in that car. And the reality is that Aston Martin isn't very good, but Fernando has managed to score points, you know, in each of the last four races ever since he got his first bunch of points in Spain. He has been consistently in the points and he's really like just like he's doing fine and that's it. See, he's doing okay. This early season not so great. Now I think he's pulling it back, and as we sort of move into the second half of the season, hopefully that Aston Martin can get a bit faster and Fernando can like build on that from now on.
Yeah, definitely something to be said for, the doom and gloom surrounding Fernando Alonso at the start of this season. And, a lot of it was reliability or just, the car not necessarily finishing the race for one or another reason. Won't go into specifics, but yeah, it's not necessarily been atrocious. He's scored points since he got that points finish in Spain, which I think finally gave him that momentum that he's needed. But it's also a case of, have Aston Martin maybe just not brought a car for this first part of the season that could properly, put them in a position that they want to be in. I remember 2023, I think it was, when they showed up with a rocket ship that looked like a green Red Bull and, gave them a vast number of points and good finishes and trophies, which was something that team really needed. But they just haven't been able to live up to that since, as the rest of the field seemingly, were able to develop a car that, was better than the current Red Bull at the very least. But it's brought other cars forward, and the midfield and the cars towards the back as well have also shown progress. But a driver who has, let's look at the other Spaniard, Aaron Carlos Sainz. We've given him a C. It's obviously not really been the strongest of seasons for the Williams team in general, who, Albon's been doing a good job, and we'll get to Albon, but I wouldn't say Carlos Sainz has been doing that great, personally.
I think he's been really unlucky. He's had some issues with the car that have just thrown away any opportunity for points. And yeah, there's a period of adaptation to the car. Williams aren't bringing any upgrades to this car. They're all in on 2026. I will disagree with you that I think Williams have actually had a very strong season compared to what they were last season. Albon has scored a lot of points. Sainz has at times been very quick. It just hasn't quite come together for him. So yeah, look, I think Carlos, the lack of results will really annoy him, but he will also know actually there is a process to go through here. I'm learning everybody's names. I'm learning to integrate within the team. Everybody knows that James Vowles has had his sights set on 2026 for about 3 years. So they've been building up to this point, and the whole reason he went so hard to get Carlos was to make sure he had the best possible lineup so that when they have, hopefully, a really strong 2026 machine, they've got a race winner in the car. And Carlos Sainz is a race winner. Alex Albon is a race winning level driver as well. So they've got two drivers who can go out and win for them if they can provide them the machinery in 2026. This year is all about putting all of the infrastructure into place so that he knows the team, they know the systems, the processes are in place, so that they know actually if we do X, Y, Z, this will happen with the car development. And if we do this with the setup, this is what Carlos wants, this is what he likes to drive. And it's just about basically James Vowles' phrase was break everything in terms of the systems and the processes and rebuild it, learn from it. If we don't try, we don't know. And I think Carlos is kind of in the middle of all of that. So I'm not concerned about his performances at all. I know we all know the smooth operator will come out when it's needed. And look, halfway through the season, I'd expect there to be a bit of a roughness to everything going on. I'd be surprised with the way these cars are that he'd just jump in and pick up massive results. Albon's performances haven't surprised me at all because I think he's an excellent driver. But with the second half of the season, I would expect to see Carlos starting to pick up some of those big results because he's starting to get more integrated with the team. So I don't see any cause for concern with Carlos. I gave him a D because the results have been poor, but I think a C is justifiable because of the issues that he's faced.
Yeah, it's a battle on a relative scale. Like, as you say, they're doing better than they were last season as a team. They have two strong, competent drivers. The issue is just getting that, race winner that they brought in up to date with the machinery, the team, and the functions and all of that stuff. So it's a building year, but we do want to see, an improvement from Carlos Sainz. We want to see the smooth operator actually looking like he's enjoying his race weekends as opposed to thinking he'd probably be anywhere else, potentially 2026. But, we don't have a time machine. We can't jump forwards and see Carlos Sainz winning in Australia next season. I might put money on that. Let's put a pin in that one. But that wasn't necessarily a five-star analogy. But if you are enjoying this podcast, we'd love it if you could take five to leave us a five-star rating on Spotify or a five-star review on Apple Podcasts. And also, if you're listening and you aren't currently subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. And don't forget to share on socials and all that jazz. Right. Let's take a look at the next bunch of drivers. And Loui, we're looking at Esteban Ocon, who has moved to Haas for the 2025 season. And it's kind of been a season of like two halves of a weekend, really. It looks like he's not necessarily performed so great on Saturdays, but then has somehow been able to just drive up to a decent chunk of points, or at least, more recently the lower end of the points as the other teams have been doing all right. But, we've given him a C. Is a C correct?
Yeah, I think so. It's like the Haas has been kind of up and down all season. Sometimes they're really on it, sometimes they're really not. And when they're on it, Ocon has made the most of that car, and he's really got some great results. When he got fifth in China, everyone was like, well, and also, Ocon is a good driver, and I think after being at Alpine and having to deal with just the mess of that team for so long, I think it's nice for him to kind of get out and try something new. And overall, I think he's done a pretty decent job of it. He sits 10th in the constructors he's not a constructor. He sits 10th in the driver standing right now, and he's I think he's fully earned that. He's doing what he needs to do. There's not all that really much you can say about Haas this year. They've kind of just been a there or thereabouts team, much like RB for much of the year. Um, but Ocon is kind of just getting on with what he needs to do, gets the odd points here and there, and no one's going, wow, that's unexpected. Because let's face it, Ocon is a great driver and he's doing what he needs to do and push that team forwards. When you've got new management, you've got a new teammate who's in his first full season, and he's leading that team, and I think in the best way he can. And sure, things could be a bit better, but I think C is a very fair grade to show that he's doing a decent job.
Yeah, and he's also working on a bit of choreography as well as we saw in not Bahrain, in Great Britain with the two synchronized Haas cars doing a little bit of ballet. But, it's not all dancing and singing. It is just about what the results are on the track. And for Esteban Ocon in 2025, they have been fairly all right. Aaron, let's look at our last C grade driver for this part of the episode, and that is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Now, obviously, Charles Leclerc is a four-time podium sitter this season. He's on 119 points, and in the sort of head-to-head, you could say he is absolutely smashing his teammate out the park from a certain point of view. Is a C grade a little bit harsh for the Monegasque?
Yes, yeah, he's beating Hamilton every which way you'd like. The only the only reason, well, the bright side for Hamilton has been his performance at Silverstone, but he always goes well at Silverstone. He just finds like a second from nowhere around that circuit. And Leclerc, it's not really his best suit, and wet races he doesn't tend to go particularly well in. And then there was a sprint in China. But apart from that, Leclerc has been absolutely the class act at Ferrari, as you would expect. Similar to the Carlos Sainz conversation we were just having, Hamilton is adapting. Leclerc is the incumbent driver, and he's making the most of that. He is obviously frustrated that this car hasn't taken the same sort of step as the McLaren did from the back end of last year. So I think he's having to get his head around that. But his performances have been really good. The second place in Monaco was great. He's had a few other podiums. I think Assi is a bit harsh because he's leading the Ferrari charge. There's not a huge amount in it because when Leclerc has a down day, it's really bad at the moment. But he's generally got the edge on Lewis, and that car is now just starting to become a little bit more drivable. They're able to get it more in the setup window. Austria and Silverstone, they looked really quick. So second half of the season, you might see Charles scoop a win if the McLarens have another tangle and Verstappen's having a day of disasters and the Red Bull's undrivable. So there could be a win on the horizon for Charles. But I think he needs to really be hoping that Ferrari deliver with both the engine and the car for 2026. There's going to be a lot of drivers looking 6 months into the future and going, I really hope that we've done the business because that could be Charles's opportunity. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. We've seen that with Lewis and Fernando. One of them was in the right place at the right time to win world championships. One driver kept getting it wrong. And, you can argue which of them is the better driver, but they're both phenomenally fast. So for Charles, I think he needs to put himself in that right position. Is that right position for Ferrari? Who knows? But this season, he's doing as well as I think he can do with the car that he's got. I think a C is a little bit harsh. I gave him a B, but I'm not going to dispute too hard against a C.
Yeah, I gave both of the Ferrari drivers a B, I think, as well. And I mostly put that down to the fact that it's not necessarily the driver's fault with the scenarios that they've been in this season. It's been more Ferrari coming in very bullish, sounding like, they could be providing a driver's championship for at least one of their drivers this season, and just not really. They did a Ferrari that the infrastructure didn't seem to be there. And the team's strategy, do we need to say any more when it comes to strategy and Ferrari? But yes, like I think a C is quite harsh, but I wouldn't argue against it. If you start digging deep down into it. Um, but let's take a look at Nico Hulkenberg, Louis. Podium sitter for the first time in 239 race starts. We've given him a B. Is there a bit of recency bias there, or is it more that Nico Hulkenberg has actually been at a B level this season?
Well, I would definitely say there's not a bit of recency bias because Hulkenberg has scored points in each of the last four races in the slowest car. And he's not exactly been then dead last in any of the other races where he has been finished. He's been consistently in the middle of that kind of slower pack. He's doing a great job given that that team is qualifying at the back or near the back pretty much every weekend. It doesn't seem to matter where he qualifies. He always seems to find some kind of way to push that car forward. And I think that's what the most important part of being a kind of a backmarker team. So, you got the points finished in Australia to kick off the season when everyone wrote that Sauber off immediately. He kind of was middling in that sort of slower pack, and then now Spain, Canada, Austria, and Great Britain, four races back to back. He's put that car in the points, and he's did a great job. I don't think Sauber could ask much more from Hulkenberg this season. I guess the reason he didn't get an A is not getting that sort of consistent points where it's kind of blowing everyone away and going, oh, wow, like he is just doing the most incredible job. I think a B is good. It's solid. He's doing everything that team needs to do. And yeah, he's probably earning that team quite a bit of money. Let's face it, money that they may not desperately need, but it'd be quite nice going into 2026 having a little bit extra cash lying around.
I think
It
Hulkenberg's experience is really shining through. If you look at the two races where he's performed best, Silverstone with the podium and Australia, where it was both races were wet, changeable conditions. His experience has really played through. And obviously, once the car has got a bit better, towards sort of second quarter of this season, we saw in Spain, he was passing Lewis Hamilton. And at a circuit where you go, hang on, a Sauber has no right being anywhere near the Ferrari. The Ferraris were managing some issues and they were on older tyres, but take nothing away. The performances from Hulkenberg in recent races have been very, very consistent, and that is the driver Sauber was signing, and they knew that. They just needed to give him the machinery, and once the machinery has come up to speed, he is delivering, and so is Gabriel Bortoleto, obviously picking up those points in Austria. So it's looking quite good for Sauber.
Yeah, when Haas brought Nico Hulkenberg out of permanent retirement, I say in air quotes because, of course, he was the super sub for about 3 seasons, I think, in between. I was thinking, why? Like obviously he is that experienced head, but he's a driver that, didn't necessarily look like he was gonna be adding something new to his story. Like, if they brought him back and fool me, I guess. What can I say? Like, I host an F1 podcast and just completely disregard anything I ever say about Formula One ever. Yeah, it's been fantastic for Nico Hulkenberg. I think seeing him on that podium after so long, finally no longer being like he is still the driver that took the longest amount of time to get a Formula One podium, but he is at least now on the podium. So, you cannot argue against that. Yeah, B grade for Nico Hulkenberg. Let's see what happens the rest of the season, and see just in case Sauber pull out, a rocket ship because all of a sudden some more Audi money shows up to use that one phrase. But Aaron, George Russell. We've given him a B. He's got one win, which happened in Canada, which was a very, that Mercedes just looked switched on for him that weekend. And of course, Kimi Antonelli also, being on the podium in that race just showed that it wasn't just the driver necessarily. But, is George Russell operating at a B tier? Is there anything he could do to make that an A?
Win more races. I mean, the Mercedes is a capricious beast, isn't it? We don't really know what we're going to get from it unless it's like swelteringly hot and we know it's just going to cook its tires and just fall back down the order, which is weird because if you think back to 2022 when these regulations were first sort of born, the Mercedes was incredible on its tires. It took ages to warm them up. Safety car restarts were its nemesis. Now they're like, okay, can we have like winter races, please? Because we'll win them all. It's it's so weird. But George, I think, has reveled in being that team leader. He's no longer looking over at the other side of the garage and going, "Oh my God, it's Lewis Hamilton," and trying to beat him and sort of being kind of in that shadow. He's no longer looked at as the sort of deputy, the prodigy in that sense. He is the leader at Mercedes. They will re-sign him for next season because I don't see Max Verstappen moving for 2026, and it's thoroughly deserved. So whether he could have made this an A or not, I don't know. Some of the races have lacked a little bit, but early in the season he picked up several very strong podiums. The car looked really good, but then Imola they took a little bit of a dip, and yeah, I think he's just sort of been hamstrung by the nature of this car and some of the setup work and the developments not quite meshing as they wanted to when they needed them to. But you look at the race in Canada and he was completely in control. He had the reigning world champion right behind him and he kept it all together. People doubt George Russell, but if you look at his F2 campaign, he was phenomenal. And obviously, the bits that he did in the Williams showed that he's got that speed, he's got everything he needs to become a world champion. It's just about putting it together at the right time in the right car and in the right environment. And I think Mercedes can be that environment, even if they do keep casting sort of furtive glances over at Max Verstappen. But I think George is giving them every reason to sign him up for 2026 and beyond. The question is whether they put Verstappen and Russell in the same team. I kind of don't think they would. But yeah, he's led that team really well. Antonelli's got a really good benchmark, and he's not been sort of it's not been the rookie who's this next hot talent has come in and matched him completely. George has been able to take his level up, which I think is really promising for him.
Yeah, definitely like moving into that team leader role very well. I think George has shown a lot of maturity over this season, particularly. But, it would be very nice to see some more wins. I think they have been hampered somewhat by, seemingly Mercedes reliability issues showing up this season. You can't be reliable the entire turbo hybrid era, I guess. But, yeah, George Russell at a B grade. Surprisingly, not our last B grade of today's show, though, Louis. Let's talk about Max Verstappen, who we have given a B grade for the 2025 mid-season point. Two wins, 165 points, and he's third in the championship, but hasn't exactly been smooth sailing for the Red Bull so far.
No, and I think honestly, for me, the reason why I didn't give him an A, because let's face it, he has completely outdriven that car at times. That Red Bull has had no, like, like no deal being as high as it's been at times. Max has had no deal like winning some of the races get or getting some of the pole position. The fact he stuck it on pole at Silverstone goes to show just how much he's overdriving and overperforming in that car. However, the reason why he gets a B in my books is because of some of these stupid antics we've seen from him this season, which kind of taints it. And it's like I always say, angry Max is dangerous Max. And unfortunately, that's come out at times this season where we've seen Max not driving at a level where he should be or doing things a bit rash. And honestly, that the incident with him and Russell in Spain was just completely uncalled for. So it kind of does take away a bit from what the great things he's done. He's had so many great performances. He's been often near or nearabouts the podium, but that car is unfortunately not very good, and it's very much hampering his opportunities to be challenging for the world title because we all know that given a half decent car, he'll push it all the way to the end, and unfortunately, the Red Bull this year just isn't as competitive as that McLaren. Sometimes it lacks behind the Mercedes, and it's sometimes on par with the Ferrari, and it's not where they need to be. And Max is pushing as much as he can, but there's only so much he can do, and I think he gets hampered by that somewhat in his performances.
I think
And
Red
then,
Bull. Sorry, I
oh,
thought
sorry,
you finished there, Louis.
keep going
I
on.
think I think Red Bull have been having to take a lot of risks with that car and its setup. You mentioned that it has no business being at the front. It's like if you take Silverstone as an example, they had to take some wing off the rear wing to get some balance in the car, but it meant they had tremendous straight line speed, and as soon as it rained, that thing was sliding all over the place. It was more like rallycross than Formula One. And that I think is a microcosm of the season. The mistake with the spin at the restart cost him an awful lot of points. You can't keep throwing Hail Marys with the car setup and Max Verstappen keep delivering. It's just not possible. He's done some amazing things. Japan and Imola were unbelievable in different ways. The overtake at Imola at the start, the pole position at Suzuka to set up the race win. But there have been other incidents, like you say, with the Russell collision. I think there was the Jeddah one where he didn't give the position back at turn one when Piastri forced him off. He had an opportunity to do that, and he could have then executed the undercut. So there was opportunities there. But I think, yeah, like you say, with some of his antics and some of that red mist coming down, it's just taken away some of those opportunities. They don't have that car advantage performance anymore, in performance anymore. So yeah, I think Louis, you summed it up really well. The car has really made him have to overdrive, and we're seeing sort of the results of that.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think we're all kind of on the same level anyway. Looking at the grades, we've all given Max Verstappen a B. Grid Talk's given Max Verstappen a B. There's room for improvement, but the improvement is in the car as well, and it's not just it's not just about Max, but those incidents in Spain, as you mentioned as well, and in Jeddah, it's showing Max when he gets a bit more desperate, and Red Bull have been looking a bit more desperate this season, and that's potentially another reason as to why Christian Horner will not be the team principal for the second half of this season of 2025. But let's finish off then with a class driver leading the championship in his third Formula One season. Oscar Piastri, 5 wins, 234 points. As I say, he's leading the championship. Louis, is Oscar Piastri an A-tier driver so far this season?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oscar Piastri has been kind of head and shoulders better than everyone else this season. In the last couple of seasons, the only real thing that's been holding us back is his qualifying position, sometimes just not being where Lando was and getting the most out of that car. We always, thought of Lando as just this absolute monster on a Saturday, and it was hard to beat him. He's started to really start push on that, and he's out qualifying Lando, especially with Lando making so many errors or just having so many bad, moments in qualifying this season. Oscar's really managed to take advantage of that. And secondly, is his racecraft. He just wasn't as good on the tires, or just wasn't as consistent. It was kind of these little issues that you always say, small gains when you slowly stack on make a big difference. And that's exactly what Oscar Piastri's done this season. His racecraft is just that little bit better. It's the way he manages his tires, his consistency, um, and then his qualifying, just making these little micro gains, and it's made a huge difference to his performance. And every time I see Oscar get into the lead or ahead, you don't ever think, oh well, he's going to lose at some point. You know that Oscar is there. He's got the car beneath him that really works. He's just got that little extra this season, which is the reason why he's top of the championship. And Lando is the one who's really having to chase now. And that's not something we've seen from Lando really before. The fact that he's really having to like get the most out of what he's doing, because he's just been that little bit better in most things. You know, the only thing I would say is that, of course, Oscar hasn't won a race now since Spain, and he was only one win in the last like six races, and that gap in the championship has come down. But he was doing a really good job in Silverstone, and I think the penalty was just something silly, and people can argue it was intentional, therefore he should deserve a penalty, or it was just coincidental that he braked so hard and then the safety car was coming in. Either way, I'm sure the second half of the season is going to be equally as good. I don't see why he wouldn't be.
The thing with Oscar, like you say, is he's moved his level up, and that's undeniable. He's faster in qualifying. His racecraft has been much better. He's better on the tires. And these are all sort of, I think, a combination of factors. Obviously, he's improved. He's got himself fitter. You look at like the picture of him at the end of last season versus the start of this season. He was a bit leaner, so that that fitness is there. So he's able to push a bit harder. He's extracting more from the car. I think this car works for him slightly better. It's a bit capricious, a bit like the Mercedes in the way that it drives. They've described it as numb on the front end, and I think Lando responds to a really positive front end. Piastri can get on with this car a little bit better. So you're seeing Lando maybe having to overdrive and Piastri just having to keep his level. And I think that's what he does. He keeps a really steady level. He doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too down. The most sort of, I suppose, emotional we've seen him was after Silverstone, where he was really angry about the penalty. So I think there's still a level for Oscar to find in terms of one lap, because we've seen in the last couple of weeks, over one lap, Lando probably still has the ultimate edge when he's not making mistakes. But I think Oscar's consistency is what stands out, and that's what could win him this world championship. His level doesn't really fluctuate an awful lot. That's what he's really sort of nailed. Last season, he was having some really good results, and then they'd drop off a bit, and then they'd come back up again. And Lando was the one more sort of steady at the front. It's kind of flipped the other way this year. I don't think we can deny that Oscar has been the class of the field. He's top of the championship, and he deserves to be. He's won the most races. He's been on the podium the most times. He's been on pole position a lot. So we're really seeing this driver, who we all knew was there, really start to flourish. And I think it's coming at the right time. But he's got a formidable competitor in the other car. And if you look at Austria as an example, Lando was superb. Piastri pushed him, but he couldn't quite get through. And I think if Lando wants to win the championship, that's the model of framework he needs to take forward. But the whole first half of the season is what Oscar needs to do again to secure this world championship. But there's a lot that can happen. 12 races, so many things can happen.
Exactly. We're only halfway through the season. There's still another equivalent of the amount of racing that we've had so far to go. So anything can happen, I think. The only thing I would probably err on the side of happening would be that Franco Colapinto wins the world championship, because, he's I'm waiting for the day he actually scores a point in the Alpine. But, you might be thinking, well, that's only 11 drivers. What about the rest of the grades? Well, we will tackle those in part two of our driver grades episode. But, Aaron, is there anything you want to plug at this opportunity?
Just my YouTube channel and Twitch channel, AHGP. So come and check it out over there. We do a bit of F125 league racing, and some F1 manager experiments. So I've currently got all the cars with a max power engine, and it is chaos. So yeah, check those out on YouTube and on Twitch.
And the ideal Alpine scenario, they want cars with a max power engine, I believe.
We gave them unlimited drag reduction, and I was managing Alpine, and they crashed all the time. So nothing changed.
Nothing changed. Louis, anything you want to plug right now?
The only thing I'd like to plug is Grid Talk Socials. At the moment, we are running a predictions challenge throughout the season, which Aaron is currently leading. In fact, he's the best in our league. We gave him an A star for his predictions so far.
I am the Oscar Piastri of predictions.
I'll probably give myself around a C. I've been doing all right recently, but most of my time has been pretty bad. So yeah, you can check out our socials at Grid Talk UK on anything that you, well, any social media platform that you consume on, including YouTube. So please check us out.
Please absolutely do. And if you want to hear more from me, I am at Ruby Rose Price on Instagram and Threads and at Rubes on Blue Sky. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? Also, make sure you subscribe to the first know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon with the rest of our grades. Thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, and goodbye.